You're watching CCN, Clarksville Community Network. Produced by Goodwin Productions. Powered by CDE Lightband.
I'm Jim Diehr, former professor, Professor Emeritus. I'm now an artist and having a wonderful time. Grew up on a ranch out in southwest Missouri. We're about 10 miles from the Kansas border. Whenever I wanted something, my father, he'd say, well, just go down to the shop and make it. So from a very early age, I started working with my hands, creating objects, drawing pictures. I've done it all my life. Well, I came to Austin Peay originally as chair of the art department 35, 40 years ago. Did that for, I think it was 8 years, and then went back to the classroom and started the pottery and ceramic program. And then I was asked to be the interim dean of the new College of Arts and Letters. Then in post-retirement, went back to the classroom for a couple of years and finished my career after 45 years of college teaching. Then I got to go to my studio and make art. Try to go to the studio every morning and work on my artwork, sculpture and or painting. Painting is kind of the go-to. After I get frustrated with a piece of sculpture, I can go paint and take it out on a paintbrush. I see my artwork as being a version of communication. Trying to make a statement that really goes beyond verbal communication. When someone looks at a piece of my work, it is not a literal communication. Whatever the viewer brings to that piece may be vastly different than what I was seeing in it. As a matter of fact, I've had shows and sort of stood back and listened to somebody talking about one of my pieces and thought, gee, I wish I'd thought of that. So I think it's great if someone can bring to a piece of my work, or any artwork for that matter, and say, well, what I see in this, because it's all about what they're bringing to the work. What their life has been about, and their experiences and all those things that are meaningful to them. Of course, I studied in New York City and had quit college and gone up there to try to be an artist. And as everybody knows, that's not as easy as it sounds. We would have odd jobs to try to make ends meet, to have something to eat. At that time, the economy kind of went down. Had a room with a musician, a jazz drummer. Things got worse and worse. We couldn't find a job. Actually, we lost the apartment, couldn't pay the rent. And so we were living on the streets. It gives you a whole different perspective of what the nature of life is about. First I went to the Air Force. They wanted 4 years. Then I went to the Navy and they wanted 4 years. And the Army only wanted 3. So I joined the Army. Of course, this is real early on. We'd barely even heard about Vietnam at that point. And so that was not really a consideration. It didn't take me very long to realize that this was not really a good idea. But in the end, it turned out to be a great idea because the Vietnam GI Bill paid for 3 college degrees for me, so that was a good thing. I never figured that I was probably bright enough to get a doctor's degree, but that was one of the things that you do in the Army, teach you that you can do a whole lot more than you ever thought you could. Customs House is a small exhibit of 15 pieces. I've been working primarily with wood, alabaster, and ceramic. And many of the figures are modeled in ceramic. And so then trying to get those 3 elements to come together and tell the story that I'm interested in. Charging ahead. Grew up, as I said, on a ranch out west, and the horses were always part of my life. And the cowboy on the other end of that piece is looking back at his past. We're charging ahead into the future, but we always need to kind of look back at the past and see where we've been and make some hopefully important decisions that will help life. It's kind of a push me, pull me kind of sculpture. Number one, it's sitting on a skateboard, kind of, historically. Once I came up with the idea of the horses, and then just modeling the horse heads in ceramic, and yet I didn't want an entire anatomy of a horse on there. So getting those shapes that would kind of work and be coming out of the rectangular forms of the wood was something of a dilemma. You know, how am I going to get this to work together? And then, of course, the big alabaster piece in the middle. The cowboy at the end is very detailed and trying to get his rope curled around. And if you've ever worked with clay, trying to get those forms without breaking up or falling down and so on. There was quite a challenge to get him and the horses together and still have something that in terms of scale and dimension work together. Nailed. In modern lexicon, you know, it can have so many different meanings. As I'm working with that piece, I had really gotten to a point where the maple, which is the big block at the bottom of it, and then having the alabaster pieces attached to that, and then the vertical piece coming out of it, kind of a thought pattern. I kept thinking I needed a textural surface that worked with that. And I was looking around the studio and couldn't find, okay, what am I going to do? Do I get another piece of wood? Do I get some ceramic? Do I, do alabaster? And as I was kind of wandering around trying to figure out this problem, I found a can of these little white nails I had used when I was working on my house to nail the aluminum around the eave of the house. And I had these left over, and I thought, aha. There is the answer to the textural problem. The piece itself is this figure that kind of is male in nature, and then suspended from the sticks that kind of represent arms is a marionette figure done in ceramics. It can take several different meanings. It can either be good or bad, I think, the way you choose to look at it. In one sense, are we being directed and manipulated by someone, or is the someone choosing to be a part of the person that they are attached to? There's a poem actually written that I wrote that is on the back of that is from the viewpoint of the marionette and how she feels about her relationship to the individual that is directing her and holding her and caring about her. How long does it take you to do this? Particularly people that have never worked with their hands or done sculpture. Well, scale makes a difference. You know, how big is it? What are the materials that you're working with? Even if it's all wood, there are hardwoods and there are softwoods. Some of them you can form much more quickly than others. What inspires you to make a piece of art or more than one piece of art? I had a lot of trouble in elementary school. I was dyslexic. The fact that I have the education that I have is probably unheard of. I found, though, that I loved reading. So getting into literature, into poetry, all of those kinds of ways of thinking about using language to communicate emotion and intellectual endeavors of different types. When one looks at the piece literally and you have a bear and a raccoon kind of faced off, and the raccoon is doing the thumbs up and saying, "Whatever you say, bear." You know, when you're kind of outweighed by power, you go with what you have to go with. Anybody who's ever been in a position of having to work with people, if you have two people, you have a political situation. Because everybody brings their own ideas to the table, and what they're thinking is important, and sort of working out what will work for both of you. And so the old raccoon is saying, okay, but then you also have to remember that raccoon, if you look at the nature of our capitalist society, where you have a bear market or a bull market, but that little raccoon is such a little thief, he's going to figure out a way to get by one way or the other, whether it's a bear market or a bull market. So, you know, I kind of see a lot of different levels of meaning in that piece. A lot of people have had a lot of fun with that. It means a lot to me when someone looks at a piece of my work and then can interpret some meaning from it. So I like the visual language idea and telling something, but I also like sort of enigmatic kinds of things, something of a mystery that people can look at and go, I'm not sure what this is, but I think I like it. That kind of an idea. Icarus. Icarus was confined to an island where he and his father then made wings out of feathers and glued them together with wax as a way to escape the island. They took off and were able to fly, but they enjoyed it so much that they flew too close to the sun and the wax melted, and then they went into the ocean. So one has to be very careful about how close to the sun do you fly. How dangerous do you want your life to be? I have a friend who said, "I just love your titles." Well, the piece itself sometimes tells me what it is about. So working with the material itself and saying, what am I seeing in this material? One of the things I used to tell my students is that creativity favors the prepared mind. And so if you're open to this material that you're working with, whether it's ceramic or alabaster or wood, it has a life of its own. And so what is it saying to me? Often, I don't start out with that full-blown idea of what I'm going to end up with. Sometimes I do. The process creates the meaning of the piece, as well as the material that you're working with. So. Working just the elements and the symbolisms that you might get from wood and from some of the more representational ceramic pieces, where I either come up with an animal form or a human form and try to insert that into the general idea that I'm trying to get over with that particular piece. Gateway to the Vanities. That actually has kind of a double meaning. It's gateway to the vanities or gateway from the vanities. I'm not quite sure which way the gate swings, which the gate that is in that piece actually does function. And so you can take the little bar off and the gate can open or close. All of us have our little egos that we're dealing with. So one needs to be very aware of whether you're going to the vanities or coming from the vanities. And maybe it'll help all of our personalities a bit to have an awareness of that. There are all those questions about the material itself, and I think there's where the art comes in. The wave. That was developed by the nature of the material that I was working with. The top piece is a piece of pecan that came from a friend who lives up in the southern part of Kentucky, and the lower piece is a piece of what's called coffee wood. Both of these friends contributed these trees. Well, one had died and one had been hit by lightning. It's sort of a wave to friendship for giving me the material. The celebration is the most meaningful to me. And it's my tribute to woman. Starting with my mother, who was a very strong, caring individual. And then coming on down to particularly my wife. who has made my life a celebration. It's a statement from me about how vastly important women have been in my life. Of course, the abstract expressionism and all of that sort of much more abstract approach to art and kind of imagery that you made. Nowadays, a lot of the three-dimensional work is installation-based and is very ephemeral. It lasts a few days or a few weeks and then it's gone. So I'm still stuck with the idea that making an object that is lasting and can be enjoyed and be a part of someone's life for a long time. So the object-based idea is something that I've stuck with. Rose ears. Well, rose ears actually, there are two pieces that make up that, a two-dimensional piece, which is literally a painting of the sculpture itself. The sculpture, the top of it there, the male form who has roses for ears. It kind of comes down to the idea that we can hear what we want. I would meet with groups of people and think that I had very clearly made my point and gotten over exactly the communication that I wanted, and then talk to someone that was in the meeting later and they heard something entirely different. So Rose Ears is about hearing the good things and being a good listener, which is a part, I think, of being able to get along with people and having a good life for yourself as well as others. So I always maintain that I'm a sculptor, but painting is just fun. This is my therapy. It's another visual communication device. There are just certain things you can't say with sculpture. Michelangelo was doing the ceiling at Sistine Chapel, and he signed it, Michelangelo, sculptor, because he didn't think he was a painter. That's kind of the way I am. There's so many wonderful painters out there that I don't really feel like I can compete. But I have fun playing with them. So it's Lenin-faced paper, and it's oil paint, and of course the bird form here has certain symbolic qualities, the raptor back here in the background, and tree of life situation. And eventually I'm going to connect this kind of halo effect with the rose. The yellow rose being a symbol of women's efforts to get the vote 100 years ago. So this is kind of a devoted for the idea of the suffrage movement. And the persistence of continuing to try and work and, you know, spread your wings and fly. The yellow rose symbolic of suffrage. And then the naysayers are kind of over here in the background of what they were naysaying about. So. After the Army, I got out and I had the Vietnam GI Bill and had come back to school. So I was already not a traditional student per se. I taught in Kansas for 12 years. I started looking for another job because in the career of teaching, you have to move from one university to another to kind of better your position. At that time, I felt like I would rather get back into the arts, the pure form of the arts rather than applied arts and product design. And so the chairmanship of the art department at Austin Peay opened up, and I applied and was hired in 1982. So I came then as chair of the art department. And so I thought, well, I'll try this college teaching thing for a couple of years and see how it works out. It worked out. If you're a good professor, you're going to be involved with those students one way or another, and you're going to be helping them. So a lot of your creativity goes into the teaching process and to working with the student. And so that takes away from your own creativity in your own artwork. Whereas once you retire, all of that creativity can go into your art. I've produced more art in the 4 years since I've been retired than I did in the probably 20 years while I was teaching. When I was lecturing to talk to students about the difference between arts and science. Science is something that has a factual base. Therefore, it is science because I've proven it's the same. It is truth. You can't do that in art. The only truth is me and what me wants it to be. And so arriving at that truth is such an individual thing, and it's an individual thing in relationship to the piece that you're working on. The hiding place. That piece of maple that is kind of encircles this little figure that is down in there. I think all of us at some point kind of think, I just want to get away from it all. I want to be alone. I don't want to hear anybody. I want to be with me. And so that's kind of the content of the hiding place. I think all of us need a little solitude once in a while to kind of get back in touch with our spirituality and what our soul really is all about. When are you finished is always one of the questions I think that all artists struggle with, is how far can I take it? When do I quit? When should I have quit instead of going ahead with it? So I think having an idea of where you have done enough. Less is not always more. One of the very important parts too is process. And sometimes you will get to a point of working with that material and looking at it and saying, I don't know where to go from here. So it goes back on the shelf. And it may be a year before you get back and go, now I know what I'm going to do with that because of something you've learned from working on another piece or some experience in your life. Or there are the rare pieces that in a week, it's done. Yes, you did it yourself. Meaning that the sculpture piece seems to have created itself. That doesn't happen a lot, but a letter to Jim in 1969. Work makes a difference. And if you keep working for the next 45, 50 years, it'll probably work out for you. Be aware of how much you enjoy doing what you do. The key for me has been, Winston Churchill said, never, never, never give up. Don't quit. Keep after it. Be consistent. Keep working.
For current and exclusive content, subscribe to CDE Lightband, connecting you at the speed of light.